Welcome back to our journey through Proverbs. We are still in the very beginning of chapter 2. We're working our way through verses 1 through 5, and they are just chock full of incredible stuff. I mean, we've already spent 2 videos on these 5 verses, and we'll see if this is the last one we do. But it has been fantastic so far. If you haven't seen those videos, be sure to go check them out. But for now, let's go ahead and get started. Now, some of you may be inclined to say, well, I'm tired of hearing you read these 5 verses, but I'm going to do it anyway so that we stay in the right frame of mind, because God's word is powerful and we should be coming to it open to a new word, a new context, no matter what. So let's go ahead and do that. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. So we are going to be focusing our attention today on verses 4 through 5. If you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures. I suppose if we forgot, right, that we were in an if conditional clause, then this is him reminding us. Yes, or if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures. And let's remember for just a second the process we've gone through up to this point. We've talked about the heart, right? And how the heart is filled with all kinds of difficult junk, right? It's filled with idols. It's filled with lust and greed and desires that are misplaced and sinful. But if we want to receive the words and commandments of wisdom, we have to make room to put them in their proper place. But making the room isn't enough, right? Just because the room is open doesn't mean anything's coming into it, which means we have to open the door of our heart. We have to make our ears attentive, is the way the Proverbs put it. And we have to incline our heart towards wisdom and understanding, right? The stuff that's outside of us, we want inside. And we don't just want it to come inside, which is great. We actually want to understand it as it comes inside, right? So we call out for understanding and for insight. Oh dear. For understanding and for insight. Because if you just had wisdom inside, but no way to figure it out, and you were just like, wow, this is really valuable, but I don't really quite know what it's telling me to do, then you'll never be able to implement it in your life. It'll never be able to transform you. And so we cry out, and I would actually even maybe add some lines here, right? Of we cry out, we are desiring, calling for, inviting in that wisdom, and inviting in the insight and understanding, the light needed to process it. And we talked about this as a movement from sort of receiving to ever more active receiving, right? So you're still receiving, you never stop receiving, but you become more and more active in the process. And we ended at desire. But when we see, if you seek it like silver, right, and search it for it as for hidden treasures. You see this seek and we see this search, right? These words, we've been focusing on the verbs the whole time. And so these should stand out to you as they are to me right now. And if you seek it like silver. If you search for it as for hidden treasures, okay? So we can ask all of the same questions that we have before, and then we'll start to understand the place of this piece in the process. But you can already see that this is farther over on the spectrum of what is more active, right? So this is more active, but it's still being active in order to receive. And we'll talk about that. But let's go through the process of the same kinds of questions that we have before. What does it mean to seek like silver? What does it mean to search as for hidden treasures? Okay. And a question that we sort of maybe implicitly asked before, but haven't done so explicitly, is what do these two things have in common? Right? Why are these? We talked about the parallel of verse 3 a lot, if the calling out for insight, the raising your voice for understanding, how these are very similar ideas, but these are also very complementary, similar ideas. And so what do these have to do with one another? Right? Why do we say both? And then why are we doing this at all? Right? So these are kind of the questions that we've started to ask through all these verses. And we're gonna answer them today. So we will start with what does it mean to seek like silver? Well, what's silver? It's something of extraordinary value, right? At least in the economy of the world. It's rare and it's difficult to find. And where do you find it, right? So we're thinking about silver as valuable. It's rare. Kind of messed that up, didn't I? Got to make sure we can all read it. It's rare. And where is it found? In the ground, right? How do you get silver? It has to be mined. Right? So let's consider that process for a minute, right? So seeking it like silver, you're seeking it as something that has incredible value, right? Something that can change your life. I mean, there's lots of historical examples that we could go to, where silver or gold or its equivalents just changes the course of history, right? Like imperial Spain, the gold rushes in America. I'm sure there are tons of examples that I can't even think of off the top of my head. But these are in the Bible, actually, we should use biblical examples, right? Empires are always coming in to steal one another's silver and gold. I was just reading in my personal studies today in Second Kings, where the king of Israel came to defeat the king of Judah, and then took all of the silver and gold from the temple. It's like, dang, dude, why did he do that? Because it's valuable, right? Why were the instruments of the temple made out of silver and gold in the first place? Because it's valuable, and it's the sort of thing that can change your life because of how great the value is. So that's how you have to seek it, as if it is something incredibly valuable. And how do you seek something incredibly valuable? Well, you seek something incredibly valuable with tenacity, right? With intensity, unwaveringly. We could get a lot more adjectives in there. But if you knew the thing you were going after could totally transform your life, you would pursue it doggedly, right? No, there's nothing that could stop you. There's nothing that could dissuade you. That's the kind of seeking we need to be doing. But what's interesting is that silver is in the ground, right? It's not like we're plucking silver off trees. There aren't silver fruit trees. You have to find it in the darkness of the ground, right? Which is pretty amazing. It's not on the surface. It's in the depths, right? This is my attempt at a cave. Mm. Right? It's in the depths. You have to go in search of it. And you have to search in a place that is potentially very scary, right? That is potentially very dark and very dangerous, right? So, dark, dangerous, scary. And that's where the things of immense value are, right? And even once you get in here, right? So you go into the cave, right? You're brave enough to face the cave. You crawl through the rocks, and you find yourself, right? You find yourself a vein of silver. How close to silver can I get, right? You find yourself a vein of silver all up in those rocks. Ooh, wow. Look at how amazing this silver is going to be, right? Oh, that's kind of hard to see on the screen, isn't it? I'll try and add some highlight to it, right? You find some silver, okay? And you get in there, and what do you have to do? You have to pickaxe that stuff out, don't you? Labor. You have to labor for it. Not only do you have to descend into the depths, you then, once you get there, have to labor for it. And even worse, you have to bring it back out. Right? So when he says seek it like silver, there's a whole lot going into this. This is something that you do have to seek after doggedly. You have to recognize that this could be the most valuable thing you will ever lay your hands on. Because if you don't realize that, right? Because if you don't realize that, you won't even, some people will never even face the cave, right? They'll never get past that part. But then when they have to descend into the depths, well, maybe some people will get into that cave and say, oh man, I have to go deeper than this. Heck no, I'm not doing that, right? And then you have to go even further. Once you get there, it's not like you pick it up and you say, woohoo, I found the silver just because I finally made it into these depths. No, you have to actually work it out. Crushing rock and pulling it. And even then, right? Even then, it's not over because you have to pull the silver out and now you have to lug it, right? Now it's this heavy weight on your back and you have to bring it back out of the cave. And once you're out of the cave, now it has to be refined, right? So we descend, we labor, we bring it back out, and then we still have to refine it, right? This is hard work. This is difficult. This is challenging. And Solomon is like, yeah, wisdom is like that. Yeah, it's this super valuable thing. It could change your life, but you better be willing to work your butt off for it. Okay, that's really interesting, Solomon. I'm not sure I do want to do that. Well, you don't have to, but you do have to consider how little of the work you've done up to this point, right? You've made room, and by the grace of God, you've made room. You've put the words, you've treasured those commandments. You've made your ear attentive. You've raised your voice, but so far you haven't really done anything, right? And I'm not saying any of those things aren't hard, but there does come a point where you have to actually move toward the object of your desire. And if you're not willing to move towards that object, if you're not willing to take the next steps, if you're not willing to seek it out, well, then you don't really want it that bad. And for some things, okay, great, you don't want it that bad, good. But for wisdom, right, we wouldn't be so impressed with you because that would be like saying, I have an inside scoop on where a silver mine is, and I can buy the land super cheap and blah, 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 and just giving up that opportunity. Meh. It's too much work. Yeah, it could make me a millionaire and I could finance my family for generations, but whatever. I'm good. That would be an insane thing to do. Well, it's just as insane to turn down wisdom. And the offers of wisdom, despite the dangers, despite the dark, despite the scariness, despite the labor, right? All of these things are worth it. That's why you have to remember that this is something of immense value, which is why I think these are so complementary, okay? Because seeking it as silver has this, challenge, this deep sort of endurance challenge. And search for it as for hidden treasure. Now that has a bit of a different ring to it, doesn't it? If we're going to talk about searching for it as for hidden treasure, I'll tell you what comes to my mind is a treasure map. Right? And we could, it's maybe a little bit of a crusty map, and it has those dots on it, and the loop-de-loops and the, X marks the spot, doesn't it? But how will we get past, the sea of despair and the mountains of doom, that sort of thing. It's a treasure map, but treasure maps, seeking after hidden treasure, this has a connotation of adventure, right? Of excitement, of heroism. And so, yes, there is this element of dark, dangerous, scary, hard, difficult work. But there's also a connotation of, yeah, it's difficult, it's work, but it's also the adventure of a lifetime. You're Indiana Jones searching for this stuff. You're him with the sandbag and the little idol thing and the switch and it's all of it, right? You're a hero. You're going on an adventure. This is really exciting. It makes me think of Jesus's parable of the treasure in the field, where the man discovers it and he's so excited that he goes and he sells everything that he has and he buys the fields so that he has the treasure. Now, that wasn't the labor we're talking about of seeking it as silver, but it was searching for hidden treasure. His attention, his heart was open, was looking for, ready to receive treasure when it appeared to him. In fact, he may have been actively seeking the treasure for all we know. If he was wise, mayhaps he was, right? So this is the two sides of this coin. Because yes, you're laboring, but you're also sort of seeking, because you may not know exactly where it is. And when you find it, you may have to work to get it out and to bring it back, right? Because with all good treasure hunt type movies, there's the process of seeking, finding, there's the challenges along the way, there's the difficulty of the return safely home, but all of these things sort of amount to this really incredible story, which is the kind of story a wise person can have. And yet, we have to remember that it is on this spectrum of receiving and then progressively more actively receiving. And so the whole purpose of the finding is to receive. I mean, imagine if you hadn't done the work of opening yourself up, of making room in your heart in order to treasure up the commandments. You hadn't made your ear attentive to wisdom. You didn't have the insight and understanding. You didn't ask for it. And you went on the treasure hunt. That would be like going on the treasure hunt, in the movie. Choose a movie you like. And going on the treasure hunt with an entirely full backpack. So you get there and you find the treasure. Oh, no room. No room in the backpack. We can't take it back. Oh. Okay, why did we do that? Right? That was silly. And actually, let's go ahead and list these out, because this is as I'm thinking through the rest of them, this is pretty interesting, right? If you skip to the seeking it and the searching, okay? So if you skip to the seeking and the searching, because that kind of comparatively, this seems like the really fun part. But if you skip to the seeking and the searching, well, maybe you're coming with a full backpack. And we'll call that full backpack syndrome. You arrive at the treasure. You find it, but you can't take it because you don't have any room. That's terrible. All right. But okay, what if we have an empty backpack? But we didn't make our ears attentive to wisdom, and we didn't incline our heart to understanding. Let's call this locked safe syndrome. Yeah, there's plenty of room in that empty safe, but you forgot the combination or you forgot the key. Oh, geez, that was a silly thing to do before taking this entire journey to go find this treasure. Oops, darn, right? So yeah, your vessel was empty, but you couldn't get anything into it because it was closed off, right? You can imagine a heart like that, an empty, lonely, sad, distressed heart that just won't let anything in to change it. So, lock safe syndrome. Empty, but not open. And then 3, of course, well, without being attentive or without calling out for insight, without understanding, without those things, well, then you'll just miss the treasure, right? You will get to where the treasure is and you won't recognize it. Because the treasure is rarely what we expect it to be, right? There's always something, there's always a twist, there's always something more. And this, in the movies, but the same is true with wisdom. If wisdom was what we thought it was, we would already be wise. So wisdom is something other than what we can conceive of. And so we have to have the insight and understanding to be able to recognize it when it comes. So what could we call this? How about rose-colored glasses syndrome? Right? You don't see clearly. You don't see things as they really are. And this would mean you find it, but miss it because you don't recognize it. So that's why I thought we should go ahead and go through these as I kind of thought of the first one, just because this reminds us, this going through the various steps and why it would, why if you skip to the 4th one because it seems like the coolest and it seems like the one you have the most control over, why we should not just skip to that step, why this is actually a process. Well, because without the previous steps, the 4th step doesn't matter, right? So just as a reminder, this is all a process. And the steps matter. You can't just skip over. You can't just get to the parts you want to get to. There's a reason all of these are included, right? There's a reason these are all part of the if framework, okay? My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom, etc., etc., etc. Maybe this is why. Maybe this is why he includes that if. I mean, I don't know. But it is interesting that the if comes back. Oh, wait, actually it was here too. I didn't notice it. If you call out for insight. Huh. Okay, well, you don't have to agree with me because that would maybe change my thought a little bit. But it is interesting that he puts this if right next to the step that does seem the most exciting, right? Or the most actionable. And it seems like maybe this is a reminder that it's all part of the same if condition. You can't have one without the other. If you take out any one of these steps, it's deficient. And you won't be able to step into the then, right? Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and you will find the knowledge of God. And we are very close to what should be the end of our video time. So I think we will pause there and go ahead and review and give verse 5 its own video, but we can also use that time to recap everything and understand how this process maybe relates to what we've already seen in Proverbs 1. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. You'll have to watch the next video to find out what we do, but also to finish the section. So let's review. We started just by going through the process up to this point with those first few steps, but then we asked our questions of what does this mean to seek and to search, and we emphasized the importance of recognizing a value that can change your life, because there's going to be a lot of things you have to do through this process, and if you don't have in mind that end goal, you don't have in mind the true value of what you're seeking, you're going to give up partway through. Right? Because when we started really thinking about, well, what do you have to do to get silver? Well, you have to go into dark and dangerous places. You have to descend, right, into the depths. And even once you find it in the darkness, you have to labor for it. And not only that, you then have to bring it back out. And even once you've brought it back out, you have to refine it. And we could probably talk about how we could identify what each one of those steps is like. Maybe that's another video. I don't know. That could be pretty fun. But we just talked about that as a process of finding silver and it being appropriate to finding wisdom. This is basically the same process. And that sounds like a lot of work. It sounds really difficult. But that's why you have to keep in mind the value, but that's also why you had the parallel line that gives that greater sense of adventure, the seeking hidden treasure, right? Where we think about the possibility of a treasure map, right? This adventure that you get to go on, this hero's mantle you get to take up, the excitement you get to have. Yes, there is work, there is labor, there is challenge, but there's also this incredible epic quest that you get to go on. And finally, we spent the last bit of our time focusing on the fact that this is all a process and every step matters. Because if you don't include every step in the if condition, you won't receive the then. And you'll find, just like we talked about with all of these different syndromes, the full backpack, the lock safe, the rose-colored glasses, if you take out one of these steps, even if you found the treasure, right? And we actually didn't do one where we did the not seeking. But you can imagine that would also be a problem. But even if you do find the treasure, if you haven't experienced these other steps, well, then it doesn't matter. Big whoop. And that then is pretty exciting, which is why we are going to address it in our next video. And I hope to see you there. Thank you for joining me on this part of the journey and look forward to talking with you again.